What if you found yourself on the streets at 13 in one of the biggest cities in the world and you're drifting towards a life of violence? You came from violence, your house was abysmal, you joined a gang, you later joined a football hooliganism gang, but you found martial arts. How would you turn out? We're going to meet somebody today that is their life story. One of the more interesting people I've talked to in a long time. The guy I'm talking about is Lee Morrison, and we'll talk a little bit about him in a minute. But first, please subscribe to the channel. Share this channel. I can't believe some of the feedback I've been getting. Some of these interviews have just blown people away. I really love bringing these subject matter experts to you, but it's really you guys that make this happen. So please do that. And of course, also, the place to go for us to get the most information is surviveviolence.com. That's where you get your free masterclass. If you like what you hear on this channel, you will just get the greatest information there. You'll also be on our email list, so that means you get first shot at any new trainings that are coming around, any new products that are coming out, and anything coming out from any of the subject matter experts that you hear here on the channel. So it's definitely worth your time. And again, we never sell your information. It's just so we can keep in contact with you. All right. So today's interview was with Lee Morrison. I've known of him for quite some time. I've never had a chance to meet him. Remember, I've been banned from the UK. My travel ban is still in effect. It's been almost a decade now. And so I have not been over there in over a decade. But the few times that I had a chance to meet him, I'd either be a couple of days out or a couple of weeks out. And I just never crossed paths. But he's been one of the biggest people that you guys have asked for. And it was a pleasure to talk to him today. I didn't know what to expect because literally I've never met the man. I knew it was going to be interesting. But as you're going to see, I didn't talk much. And that's not a slam on anything. Lee is really, I gave him a parameter and I said, hey, can you give us this background? Boom. He went with it. And then he just gave a progression that hit every question I would have asked him. And I found myself just really enjoying the interview and letting him go with it. Now, listen, there are some technical glitches on this from my end, meaning I don't know what the hell was happening in the studio. The lighting, we just couldn't get it right. When we were going live with Lee, I didn't want to delay things, so I just went with it. So yes, don't waste your time making your comments about the fact that my lighting was off and the green screen was off. I get it. We will fix it. But it doesn't take away from the content. And the good thing is most of the time it's Lee that's on the camera. So he is going to talk to you about a progression. And the first part of the interview is a 3-part interview. In the first part of this interview, he's going to talk about his background, how he grew up with violence, the fact that, he was trained in martial arts, but he understood from being on the streets and having to deal with real violence, the difference between the two. He then worked the doors of London. And this is something that I can't emphasize enough. The doormen that I've met from London, especially when I was there in the late 80s through the 90s. That was kind of the prime time for doormen in London before all the rules changed. They're probably some of the most proficient people in the world. I know some of you know Jeff Thompson from back in those days. They were just amazing guys that put real hands on people. But not only that, it's the acknowledgement of human nature. They understood people. They knew how to read people. You're going to see a lot of that in this interview with Lee. He's he's got the Southeast London accent, so it might be a little hard for you guys to follow, but it's worth your time to hear how he talks. Now listen, he's also rough. I don't put any constraints on anybody, but if you don't like foul language, you're going to be sorely disappointed because Lee does not. He's extremely animated in his talking, and it's just worthwhile. But as I told you, I'm here to make sure you get great information. The last thing I'm going to do is censor somebody who I think is a subject matter expert and can help you. This is how Lee communicates. It's extremely effective. I wasn't offended at all. I actually enjoy being around people like this. I think you're going to really grab his authenticity. He really cares. And that's what came through in this whole interview. So I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you and getting your feedback. So with no further ado, let's get into it. All right, Lee Morrison, you've been just highly demanded to get interviewed by the people on the channel here. I'm really happy you took the time to do this. Can you kind of give people, because we've got mostly Americans that are listening right here. Can you give them a little idea about your upbringing, where you came from? Because I think that's really relevant. I'm very familiar in having gone university over there for a little bit and spending a lot of time in the military over there. I'm very familiar with the background that you come from, but most Americans don't. And I think it's absolutely relevant to who you are today and how you teach.
Well, first of all, hello, everyone. Everybody that comes to similar conclusions within the field of counter violence have usually had similar experiences. So they may be very different. They may be, but it could be from somebody's come from a more of a military background. Maybe somebody's got very familiar with violence through security or being a cop. Or maybe someone's got very familiar with violence just from birth and upbringing. So I was in the latter. So I was born in Southeast London to my mum. She was a single mum. We never had a home as such of our own. And she used to move around quite a lot, working as a SRN, state registered nurse. And she would get free accommodation and the salary, and I would be with her. So I moved around to a lot of different places, which means I went to a lot of different schools during that time. Now, being that she was a little bit neurotic, she could never keep a job down very long, and we just moved around from pillar to post, me always being the new kid. So my first familiarity with how unpleasant people can be come from the schoolyard. So, I got bullied from an early age. And then there was violent abuse at home, and it got to a point where I left home and school at the age of just coming up to 12 years old, and I become a street kid in the streets of London with many other street kids who had a similar fucking story. And in that sort of situation, you lived on your wits, you had to rob to eat, you had to have a little bit of malevolence to you if you were going to be able to deal with the same. But there was an old sort of school of conduct, if you like. There was still a code of conduct that give you a moral compass. No one would beat up somebody that couldn't defend themselves. No one would hit a girl. No one would slap a kid. It was a different kind of thing in my day. But my introduction with violence began at school and at home, so I couldn't stand it anymore, and I left. And I was on the street. And then I got involved with gangs and various unsavory people, shall we say. Fast forward through that period of time till about the age of 16, where I met my first wife. And by the age of 17, I had my first son and was looking towards settling down. But the period between 12 years old and 16 was a very manic period for me, very sleep with one eye open, adrenal inducing, if you like. So right, even from a young age, I was very familiar with adrenaline, very familiar with violence, very familiar with the predatory dynamic, the way people hurt people. And I rubbed shoulders with them a lot. And at the same time, from the age of 11, I had my courting with martial arts. I found a Kung Fu Monthly Bruce Lee magazine on a bus once. It was a poster magazine that you folded out. And I remember looking at it thinking, fuck me, but he ain't got the life I got, and I wouldn't some of that. And I got really interested in the martial arts. So from the age of 11, all that was around was traditional karate, aikido, judo. So I immersed myself in those things. Now, I lived as a street kid at the time. And back then you had certain ability to get yourself a place, so a bed and breakfast place, the state paid for it, and you could do various wheeling and dealing deals and still get by. But my only thing that kept me on course was that I'd started martial arts, if you like, right? And I just had an interest in it. But a separate part of the entity to that was I was involved in street gangs, and I was fighting on the street. And then a little bit later on, I got involved in football violence and organised stuff, and was experiencing it from that side, which wasn't anything like martial arts, as you know. And what I found was that the action of me practicing traditional martial arts at the time, if you wanted, acted as a yin-yang, kind of kept me on something I was really interested in, stopped me straying off the path too dark, if you know what I mean.
Right.
But I was experiencing violence a lot on that thing. And then, like I say, I met my first wife, and by the time I was 17, we had my first son. And I started to move away from certain things like that. Then at 19 years old, I went on the doors, and I worked on the doors for 14 years. And all through this period, I'd kept training in martial arts. So by this time, I'd experienced Japanese, Okinawan, Chinese, Thai, lots and lots of different Eastern methods of martial method that were around that you really had to search out. It was just a passion, a love. It was something that kept me on the straight and narrow. And then I started training in Western boxing and various sort of things, found Thai, which really gave me good mental conditioning. And then somewhat later through my door years, I started to move towards the reality-based scene. And at that time, Jeff Thompson was in vogue in the UK, and you had a guy called Jim Wagner, who was quite familiar, becoming familiar in the US. And of course, everyone had researched the other stuff. We looked at the Paul Vuneks, we looked at the scars, we looked at your stuff, we looked at all sorts of things and researched as students, you know. But I worked on a door Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night for the majority of my income in some right shitholes, I will tell you. And what they served as was a training laboratory. So they were a training laboratory where, you know, a few of us at the time that was trained together and like-minded could find out what worked and what didn't fucking work.
Right.
And I found that the major hurdle all through martial arts, reality-based self-defense, Krav Maga, and so on into the realms of combatives, of which I'll explain what that is in a second. The ingredients that were getting whittled down were the conclusions that people who had had similar experience of violence had come to. And basically, the first one is people only treat you the way you let them. So the first component is a mental component. You've got to know in yourself where you draw the fucking line in the sand, what you're willing to fight for, what you're willing to stand up for. Right. So if I'm going to implement self-protection, physical skills, you know, in any sense, it's only going to be out of an act of sheer desperation. Because if I could have avoided it through good pre-contact cues, etc., then I would have done. If I could have de-escalated, I would have done. I would have done anything I can to avoid the situation, because as you know, the best self-protection of always don't fucking be there.
Right.
So what my early upbringing gave me, right from the days, you know, when I used to lie in bed at night because I've been left alone all day, and I'd hear the door slam and I'd wonder, was that the wind or is she drunk again? Because I'm going to get dragged out of bed and I get the shit kicked out of me again. So I had that at home, and I had bullying at school, and then I left when I was 11, and then I got involved with street gangs. I mean, what do you want? You've got somebody now who's had incremental education in what predatory behavior is like, and what violence is like, and what adrenaline feels like, and the mechanisms that you've got to develop in order to deal with the same. You know, so it was almost like a finishing school of how you deal with violence. And it was put upon me. It wasn't my upbringing. It wasn't a choice. And all this time, the thing that kept me on the straight and narrow was my love for the martial arts, right? So I would study and study and study. And it wasn't until I started to integrate various things and get principle-based ideas that I would actually see martial skill come together in a physical sense. And like I said, the training laboratory for that was the door. But the first lesson that you got to learn is, you know, what would make you willingly engage in violence? Well, you don't want to fight over a parking space. You don't want to fight because somebody looks at your girlfriend. If you're a cornered animal, you're only going to fight out of an act of sheer desperation. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you're going to fight out of an act of sheer desperation, then you are going to engage 100% committed. There's no half measures. It's all or fuck all, right? And that's a mindset thing. That's a mentality thing. So the first thing you've got to develop, the first lesson I learned is, when I first fought back and smashed the first bully to pieces, was, people actually only treat you the way you fucking let them. So you've got to have a line in the sand, if you like, you know. Everyone that knows me will tell you, right, I'm a gentle soul. You know, I like to think I'm a good skin. I do everything I can to help people. I'm part of an ecosystem, not an ecosystem. But you fucking make me a cornered animal, I'll steal your face, fucking simple. And the reason for that is I know how dangerous and fucking scary and savage a predatory street criminal can be. And I know the immediacy of that from pre-fight, few seconds of verbal dialogue to what they can turn into and what they can do, because I've seen it and I've been on the receiving end of it and I've dished it out. I've been all sides of the coin. So if you have that understanding and that knowledge, trust me when I tell you, you would not fucking hesitate if the chance presents itself to preemptively take this fucker off the planet. So again, a principle-based thing. So here's the first lesson that violence taught me. People only treat you the way you let them. Second lesson is you've got to get your head right. So if you're going to deal with an extreme level of aggression and violence and you know it's coming, you've got to have the ability to access an instantaneous level of violence and aggression that will totally fucking eclipse what you're facing. And this is where all the dynamics of good self-protection come in. So think about it. There's three elements to self-protection. First, it's personal security, street smarts, your ability to be alert, aware, switched on, environmental awareness. Add to that pre-threat recognition. So not only are you switched on, but you know what you're looking for. You understand pre-threat queue dynamics. You know what it means when three guys are walking down the street and you're walking this way, and the one in the middle makes harsh eye contact with you and then has group communication, and then they all look at you. You understand immediately what the fuck that means beyond an instinctual level. And if you have a good understanding of awareness and pre-threat awareness security, then you're more likely to spot a problem before it becomes a problem. In which case you can avoid it, right? Get gone. Best self-protection of all, don't be there. If not, you want to be able to develop some good de-escalation skills. Depending on where you're from, what your upbringing is, you know, whether you sound very well off and well-to-do and rich, which would indicate soft, or if you sound a bit rough and rough like me, which would indicate street. You know, there's these interpretations that a street criminal will assess. So, but having the ability to be, you know, for verbal judo would be a good thing. All of these things that I'm giving you now, including how to control with a non-violent posture as you de-escalate and extract yourself, would be considered methods of personal security. Street smarts. These are non-physical options. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The next two elements of self-protection are both physical, and it's because the soft skills failed. They're your hard skill elements, and that's the physical dynamic. And what it means is physical violence is fucking imminent. Well, now it's a case of either you've got to be the hammer or the anvil. So the highest probability of success lies in a proactive physical dynamic. Meaning, if I know that this fucker's going to kick off with me, I'm going to hit him first, and I'm going to attach to him so he doesn't get away from me, and I'm going to repeatedly beat on any available target until he's no longer fucking standing, till he is no longer ambulatory. He is done. So it's an asymmetrical dynamic that I'm using.
Right.
It's not a reciprocal exchange where I'm going to let him kick off. He does something to me, then I do something to him. My turn, his turn, my turn, his turn. Fuck no. My primary objective, if I can't avoid and can't escape, will be to be first. And that looks like me, more of me, fucking finished. An asymmetrical dynamic for violence. I'm going to hit him first, I'm going to keep attacking until he's no longer moving. And I'm going to put a fuck you on the end of every shot I hit him with. And that dynamic doesn't come from martial arts. That principle, that concept comes from criminality. And it comes from warfare. Just look at the Argentinian War, Seeking of the Belgrado. Just look at the preemptive strike on, during World War II in Japan, right. When they, I can't remember the name of it, when they did a preemptive strike with all the fucking
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, sorry, Pearl Harbor, my bad. But Pearl Harbor, they did a preemptive strike which took out all your aerial capacity while Marines were still in there fucking holding their dicks. There was no capacity to respond. Strategically, preemption, me, more of me finished, is what works. Would you agree? Yeah, that's why military use it. That's why criminals use it, right? So my martial physical skill set, tools, whatever I picked up over the years, work best behind that dynamic. Proactive physical dynamic will give you the highest probability of success because the first with the most usually comes out the best, right? Next to that, because it's not always possible to be preemptive. Fuck no, maybe I've had a bad day and my radar isn't on because I'm preoccupied and now some fuck is on me and now I've got to respond. Well, now I would call that counter-offensive. He's done something to me, now I have to deal with him. Whereas previously I was offensive. And we all know best defense is good offense. But if you've actually done something to me, I am counter-offensive, which means you went first, and now it has to be me, if I can get myself out of this situation. Because if you've already been assaulted or attacked, what happens next depends on where you've been hit, how badly you're hurt, and whether you have the minerals on a psychological level or not to break out of that momentary freeze, because you will be shocked, and fight back. On an emotional capacity level, you have that ability to, as soon as you receive that you're frozen, to explode in all directions. I mean, that's the only thing that will break freeze. But counter-offense dynamic means I fucked up, now this guy's punching me. I fucked up, now there's a weapon here. I fucked up, now he's double-leg takedown, he's got a fucking mount. How the fuck did that happen? Well, it happened, and now I've got to deal with what he's doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. These are contingency plans for the what if. What if I can't avoid it? What if I can't de-escalate? What if I can't be first? And what if you catch me by surprise? Well, now you've got to have principle-based methods that stand up. And once you know them, you have to pressure test the shit out of it. So you train under complete non-compliancy and spontaneity. Now you see what comes out. But I digress. They're the three elements to self-protection. And the problem, what I've just called counter-offense, is what everybody calls self-defense. So self-defense is the counter-offense that I'm talking about, because think about how self-defense works. Self-defense works when so-and-so is doing something to you, and now you have to do A, B, and C to deal with it. The very word defense, the very word defending means you're fucking losing because someone else is already doing something to you. That's never the ideal. So all Krav Maga that I've seen, and I teach some of the highest level Krav Maga instructors in the world, they're also instructors under me. And I'm not taking anything away from Krav Maga at all, because if that was around back in the late 70s, 79, 78, when everyone else was punching around in white pajamas, everybody would have jumped on that. That wasn't an available option. And I'm sure the way Krav Maga was intended by Amy Lichtenfield was much more proactive anyway. But if you go to the average reality-based self-defense class, it's exactly what it says on the tin. Self-defense. Defense indicates that somebody has done something to you and you're responding by defending yourself, which means you've not got initiative. He had it, and you're trying to get it back. And like I said, how you get it back depends on where you've been hit, how badly you're hurt, and how quickly you can get over the psychological shock of being in a fight and get in the fight, if that makes sense. So everything that I trained over the years, rather than take physical techniques, of course, I learned how to hit very hard, left and right from any direction, from restriction. I learned about human anatomy. I learned about targeting. I learned about cause effect. I learned about weapon formation. I learned about economy of motion and all the great things that martial methods give you. But what you see is actually about comes from what was born into me from birth. My upbringing becomes then my perception of how predatory behavior operates within a civilian level, because, you know, I'm giving all of this concept to you via my experience growing up in the UK, where we have no Second Amendment. There is no legal weapon ownership here for the purpose of self-defense. So our God-given right to arm ourselves against armed enemies was taken from us a long time ago.
Right.
And yet there's armed enemies that will attack us. Because here, if a criminal carries a weapon, you know, he's not likely to get, let's say a street criminal carries a blade. So last time I looked, it was £5,000 fine and up to 25 years in prison if you use it. 5 years in prison or 3 to 5 years in prison if you're caught with it. Well, that's never happened to any fucking criminal case I've looked into, and I've looked into many, because the blade carry is usually a TIC, a taken into consideration, because we've got you on a drugs charge, we've got you on the assault, we've got you on the battery, we've got you on the entry, so we drop the weapon. That's what you usually get. Then you get a good citizen that lives in fucking Hackney Wick in southeast London where there's 37 stabbings a day, who's petrified, who's actually carrying a knife, regardless, he's not got the mindset to actually employ it, so it's not going to be of any use to him. But he's carrying it out of fear for self-defense. Well, that poor bastard will get 5 years in prison. and 5-year fine. So the whole,
well, just on that point, I think it'd be really interesting. And again, American audience, I tell this story in America and they can't understand it. Basically, you had a reality star probably about, I don't know, about probably 10, 15 years ago. She was in her flat and there's a backyard to the flat. She's some teenagers jumping over, lots of break-ins, stuff like that. Called the cops, the whole thing. The kids kept coming. And at one point she grabbed a butcher's knife and she showed it through the window as they're getting to her door, and the kids took off. Cops get there. They start doing the interview. She says it came there. When she gets to the point to where she said, oh, well, they got to my door and then I showed the knife, that became the focus. All of a sudden she was the criminal. They completely changed their method, and she actually had to defend against that.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, the persecuted citizen, that's all part of the plan. That's all part of their plan. The cops here now have gone rogue. But the bottom line is, you can't arm yourself because there's no Second Amendment or anything like it. You can't carry anything for the purpose of self-defense, not even a can of pepper spray. I think all women should have a chemical irritant. You can't have fuck all, nothing. Right. And yet the criminal or the terrorist carries regardless for the cause of harm. So there's this disproportional armament. Now, when I started UC 20 years ago, what you're most likely to have faced, you will face multiple assailants, 2, 3 against 1. You will face someone with a weapon. He's got a tire iron, he's got a gun, he's got a blade, he's got half a brick. Not usually a firearm back then, but it happens obviously in London and places like that now. But I'm talking about when I started UC. You'll deal with someone with a weapon or multiple assailants. And that's death, that's a disparity in threat that you may not be able to equalise, and that could end your life without doubt. But if you evolve over the last decade, just the threat to women alone. So when I started UC, right, the statistics on a threat to women pointed toward that 75% of attacks on women actually took place from somebody they know. Their husband, their boyfriend, a colleague, somebody that they knew. 25%, those random attacks where a woman was dragged down an alley or kidnapped, put in a car, were 25% attack from an unknown. 10 years later, when you had a massive fucking influx and literal swarming of Europe from an immigrant invasion, all from people from other walks of life that have different way of thinking about things, different values on what a woman is about, different thought process on everything, including criminality, then all of a sudden, almost overnight in Europe, and I've taught all over Europe with specific requests to teach women, you are seeing a reverse in the dynamic. It's almost like 75% now of attacks on women within Europe come from a man unknown. Wow. And the MO now is about 2 girls are taken by 2 or 3 men and raped at knife point. So multiple armed assailants. That's a big dynamic change. I don't know of any unarmed skill set that I could give a woman that would give her the chance of dealing with that. Right. So my UC has progressed. I now teach, where relevant, the use of a point and edge tool, the use of an impact weapon, as well as unarmed skills. But I digress. The assaults on women has maximized. What you're also seeing now in the last 5 years alone. So you're all aware of the active threats that we've had here. So you call it an active shooter, usually because there's a gun involved. We call it active threat because it's usually 2 or 3 fanatics that are looking for a free magic carpet ride to fucking paradise with a knife in each hand, taped to their hands because they have the savvy and understanding that under adrenal stress, they'll drop it. So they are educated, they are committed, they are fit, they are fucking motivated, right? And they are willing to engage extreme amount of violence. Now you're getting these attacks where they're coming into people with vehicles on London Bridge, jumping out and starting hacking everyone to pieces. Now, if we fast forward from when that happened, what we're starting to see also now is that actually potentially originated as a crime from our own domestic government that's supposed to be looking after us. You could call it a false flag, call it what you like, but there was some involvement. I mean, all of this is coming out now. But regardless of that, there was that threat. There was this armed threat coming into a place where there's people and raining attacks upon them. You're also seeing incidents that were less reported in the media outside a normal shopping centres, shops such as Primark, somewhere like that, where you've got 3, 4, 5 members of a Somalian gang fighting each other with a machete. So what you can see in this last 10-year period is that the threat has evolved. The threat has changed. Now, your good likelihood, you have an argument with one person over a parking space in a car park, you could come out with all these friends and they're all fucking armed. So you're looking at multiple armed assailants. So you've got to move with the time. So UC is in a, I'll give you the martial umbrella category, right? So you've got this martial umbrella, not in any order of importance because they've all got relevance. One end, you've got traditional martial arts. Next, you've got combat sport, which is a huge, face it. And these combat sport athletes are fucking warriors, without a doubt. Right. Then you've got run-of-the-mill self-defense, somebody, retired army officer teaching, ladies how to break away from somebody holding their wrist.
Right.
Run-of-the-mill, yeah. Then you've got so-called reality-based self-defense, which is anything from, I don't like to diss anyone, so I've got nothing good to say, I won't say anything, hence I'm not going to say anything, right through to some really good workable methods. Because there's some great methods of Krav Maga out there, great methods of reality-based. There's some brilliant people in this business. And then right at the extreme end of this self-protection umbrella, if you like, is combatives. So understand what combative means. What it is, it's not a system. It's not a style. As soon as you stylize and systemize anything, you put it in a box and shut the lid and give it no room for growth. It's not that. What it is, it's a bunch of concepts, principle-based concepts with this very small gross motor toolbox that is retainable under fight stress where there's the presence of adrenaline, often misinterpreted for fear, fatigue, disorientation, confusion, pain. Under those conditions, the what you do in a physical sense got to work. And in which case, the what you do in a physical sense has to be small in number because of Higgs law, and it has to be gross motor in nature. So a small gross motor toolbox driven by concepts overseen by mentality. And by mentality, I mean combative mindset. So the combative perspective is the biggest part of combatives. So combatives, plural, in the dictionary doesn't exist. It's a modern word coined by the modern self-protection fraternity. And it's come to mean concepts, principles, with a small gross motor toolbox and skill set driven by mentality and willingness to take part. It's more organic. It's 90% emotional, mental attitude. So the lesson I said to you that I'd learned very early on was people only treat you the way you let them. The next lesson that I learned in order to deal with those people, the very first thing you've got to do is you've got to get your head right. If I'm going to engage in violence, I've got to give myself the green light. I've got to give myself the willingness. I've got to get my head, heart, and balls in a line. I've got to put it into a fucking spear point, and I've got to put it through you, or I'm going to die doing it. So that's the mindset behind combatives, willingness to take part. Then it's tactically, it would be best if the whatever I'm going to do, I do it before you do anything. So I'm going to tactically be preemptive and keep going so there's no recovery. So blitzkrieg, this principle of blitzkrieg, German word. This is what it means, an offensive, proactive campaign designed to totally fucking overwhelm the enemy before there's any chance of recovery or retaliation. That's not a fight. I'm not teaching you to fight. I'm teaching you how to clinically remove the threat. And the evolvement of UC over these last 10 years in order to accompany the current threats that we're facing, incorporate tier 1 civilian skills. So you'll know as a connection with the Navy, SEALs, and etc. You know what tier 1 is. Tier 1 is the best of the best, correct?
Yep.
When I'm talking about SEAL Team 6 or DevGru, I'm talking fucking tier 1 up here, not mediocrity here. Yes. So imagine that concept or that idea of tier 1, but a tier 1 civilian, not operational, just a tier 1 civilian. So I am my own. As Pat McManara says, my own fucking personal, my family's own personal security detail. I am that. It stops with me. Right. Well, if I want to be the best self-protection trainee that I could possibly be, what skills will I need and why? And this is where your American audience has an upper hand on us to a degree, right? You'll see where I'm going with it. Self-protection or combative training in a sense normally is understand the mental conditioning and the willingness that's needed, but the actual physical skill set relates to you being tenaciously, explosively aggressive from an unarmed perspective. because as UK citizens, like I said, we're not allowed to carry any weapons. So our training would incorporate unarmed skills and maybe the use of an improvised weapon of opportunity that wasn't a weapon by design, but it had weapon attributes and I needed it in this moment. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So that was normal UC, but tier one level of tier one civilian combative training, what skills would you need? Well, of course, you need to get a mindset in play. I'm not going to waste the interview talking any more about that because that's the most important element and I'll go on forever. But mindset, willingness to fucking stand and take part, no matter what happens. Followed by a very good unarmed skill set. I mean, upgraded military level grade. So how does that change? Well, it doesn't really change. So gross motor strikes that would generically shake the brain, any fucking structure that will collapse the airway or impose on the breathing, anything that will destroy mobility. So I know your method. It's all designed to break this motherfucker down. Well, if you can't breathe, you can't fight. If you can't see, you can't fight. If you can't stand, you can't fight because you got to crawl to catch me. But if you're fucking unconscious, you can't do anything. So my objective in the physical.
All right, that's the perfect place to stop for part one. He's just starting to get into the tier one civilian. It's a pretty cool concept. He's going to go far more in depth on it tomorrow. But you can see, I just enjoyed the conversation, man. I was just listening. He's a captivating speaker and very, very thoughtful in his approach to things. So I hope you enjoyed the first part of this. We're gonna go ahead and close this out. But again, before I close out for today, please remember to hit surviveviolence.com. Give us your email. Also, any of your friends or family members that you think would be interested in getting great information, please pass on the surviveviolence.com free masterclass. It's there. And most importantly, please subscribe to the channel, make your comments, hit the notification bell. That's what really helps us grow. And you guys are the main reason that we've grown literally without any advertising to date. So it's been really amazing. But Lee's second and third installments will be coming up very soon. And I look forward to your comments about this first installment with him. I really thought it was interesting how he covered, the idea of coming up and growing up in the way he grew up, and then how he transitioned from all his experiences and brought it into a principle-based system that he's talking about. What you'll probably notice through all of this is there's some consistency with the subject matter experts I bring. We all say things differently, but we talk about the same principles. We all kind of come to the same conclusions. It's not rocket science, but you have to be thoughtful in your approach and you have to be honest in your approach. And I really appreciate Lee's in both of those situations. He's absolutely great. So anyways, I'm looking forward to the next two installments and looking forward to your comments. All the best.